Today we're back at Faneuil Hall Marketplace, and our subject for the day is people. And why is it taking us so long to get to people? They frequent the marketplace, they're everywhere. It's what makes the marketplace so lively. But we need to work up to it, so today we're going to focus on putting figures in our paintings. What you see me doing now is I'm applying a very light wash to establish what I like to think about as the big shape that kind of covers most of the painting, and you'll see I maintain the integrity of this shape throughout the painting. It isolates some of the important whites. It brings focus to that central group of people. It gives a very shadowed effect to the back of the marketplace. Actually, it's the front of Quincy Market, but the shadow becomes a very important part of this painting because it's creating the strong light that is falling across the front and across our figures. So we really need that darkness behind. And you see me putting some colors onto the figures. This is to remind me, first of all, where they are and start to create brightness to their clothing. In the previous tutorial, you saw how we painted a group sort of as a series of blobs, which, when isolated and given details, they look like a group of figures, and that's going to be our central focus. I've started now to add the background wash. The background wash is, as I said, sort of a backdrop to everything. And in this background wash, I'm establishing the big mid-value, which is quite dark. You see I'm starting with burnt sienna, ultramarine blue, some viridian green up at the top, but I'm joining everything through brushwork. I'm joining these shapes and colors so that they're going to read as one unit in the finished painting. We'll have a quick read of the background, whether it be trees, buildings, doorways, even distant figures. We're going to read it all as one. And I continue to work left to right, leaving a few areas for the sky to poke through. We can see a nice blue sky back there, which reminds us of what a beautiful day it is. Here's the front of Quincy Market. I'm using, again, burnt sienna, a lot of yellow ochre, and establishing the facade, the front side of the marketplace, which at early morning is in shadow. That's our light for today, is this a strong shadowed light that's just raking across the scene, helping me to isolate the figures. This is a bit of detail now because I need to preserve at least the larger shapes of the figures, and I'm doing that by cutting around with a strong dark. Adding a light foreground color to our pavers, and they're going to be made to shine in the finished piece. Now we'll start to build up some of these peripheral figures. These are seated figures waiting for some entertainment to begin, I imagine, and they help us to create a feeling of depth as they move back in the painting, a feeling of repose, and also we can cast some long shadows on the benches on which they're seated. And this part really slows down because we need to get some important detail. As we know from our experience, when we make a mistake with the figure, it becomes a tragedy. It just glares at us. If we make a mistake with that tree back there, we can still make it look like a tree and it's not going to bother us. But if I put the head too far left, too far right, or too big, or put the arm with the obtuse angle, it's just going to look tragic. So you take your time with this and you build up the figure rather simply. You notice I'm using almost single brush strokes to indicate the torso, shorts, legs, other parts that are important. And I'll stay with this section until I'm relatively happy. I'm going to carry the cast shadow now across the front of the scene. The front of this shadow too is important to the painting because it isolates this group that's moving through the shadows, advancing towards us. It isolates the couple that's closer to us, and the distant figures as well. If you remember when we were doing our little drill with people, we placed figures in the background, small. We placed figures in the midground, getting larger, and we placed a few figures in the foreground, which were quite large. The thing to remember, the thing that's very useful, is their heads are going to line up. I know that we're not all the same height, but when doing pictures of this nature where you have a lot of figures and you're on a flat plane, in other words, you're not looking up a hill or down a hill, if you put the figures all with their heads lining up, you're going to create an instant feeling of depth to the painting. And you do see that they come lower in the picture plane. Their legs come lower to the bottom the closer that they are. But basically in this painting, you see their heads are lining up. This also makes it easier to place the figures. If you're looking for that line on which they line up, you'll have more accuracy in representing the figures. We're doing some detail work now in the facade at Faneuil Hall. These beautiful columns with an American flag waving underneath present an opportunity to throw some light back up into the scene. A lot of darks in this painting. However, when we have a strong lit day like today, we're going to see what we call light bounce. Basically, that means the ground surface is bouncing light back up into the buildings. And the fact that I'm leaving the upper part of Quincy Market bright helps to create that the effect of light bounce. Well, we continue to tighten up the painting, adjusting small areas, putting details on our figures, shadowing and blending, adjusting with a small brush. This is a very methodical part of the painting, and it's an area where you want to take your time and step back quite often to make sure that the painting as a whole is still working. When we're working close like this, it's very easy to lose the perspective of the whole painting. So, well, now we're dotting our I's and crossing our T's with the heads and smaller features of the figures. This brings a light and a clearer view of our subject. We'll put some bags, hands, paint some pants and colorful parts of the painting to finish this off. The shadows you see are all moving in the same direction and they're longer, so that gives the impression that the light is low and strong against our subject, which is exactly what we'd like to portray in this scene. The people, they don't hold still, but with practice you can develop your eye and your visual memory to be able to catch them in movement and record certain gestures. The old masters, in fact, spent years training themselves to render the figure in any position. We can do the same just through practice. Many, many figures. Here's the finished piece, lively colors, bright day at Faneuil Hall Marketplace. You can see how they move back in the picture plane, and they appear to be walking through the shadows, brightly illuminated. So that's our subject for today, people at Faneuil Hall.